Just give me 2 seconds and I think we'll be live.
Should close my window, huh? Can you hear the landscaper next door?
I think we're good, Diana.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry for the delay. Welcome to the Board of Education Policy Committee meeting. Today is Thursday, September 14th. Time is now 5:07. With me this evening, I have member Mary Ellen Flaherty Ludwig, board member Janine Randolph. From the team from central office, we have Ralph Valenzizi, Carol Wilshire Toth, and attorney Louis Bray. So first item on the agenda is the minutes. Was everybody able to read the minutes? Any changes or? No? All right. So all in favor to approve the minutes, please say aye or raise your hand. Thank you. That's unanimous. And so this evening we have a lot of policies to go through, but we are going to make a change in the agenda. We're not adding or deleting anything. We're just changing the order. So motion to move Series 6000 weighted grading for honors classes to the top of the agenda.
Motion to move.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. All in favor? All righty. With that being said, Ralph, it's all yours. Thank you.
Sounds good. And Chairman Carpio, thank you so much for excuse me, for kicking off the meeting tonight. I apologize if I'm coughing a little bit. I think my allergies are getting a little to me tonight. But with us tonight too, we have our new in corp counsel, attorney Louis Bray, joining us, as well as Carol Wilshire Toth, who's in charge of workforce development and also oversees our counselors. Our first policy that we have tonight, actually, out of all the policies, the 5 that are on there, only one is actually a new policy. Last year, as we went through all the model policies, one we did not review was the one called our weighted grading policy. So I just wanted to take a moment to give Carol a couple of minutes to explain how our weighted grading works. But every district needs to have a policy on how they grade. We do use a weighted scale for our schools. So we won't go through in depth of the actual policy itself, because once again, it's actually been in place. But let me see about pulling it up real quick. So our weighted grading policy explains our calculation of our grade point averages for students. And I'll have Carol explain that to you in just a moment. Once again, we've made no changes to what we've been doing for many years at all. It's just that this is the actual policy itself. And it explains that why we calculate our grades too. And once again, it's calculated, it's weighted depending on honors classes, AP, and so forth. This policy just explains that we have weighted grades. It also refers to, if you want to understand how the grade weighting works, that's actually within our program of studies. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carol to just briefly explain how our grade weighting actually works. And you can, like I said, we can send you a copy of the program of studies if you'd like to look at it more in detail. But it's something that we've had in place for quite a few years. And Carol, I'll give it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much.
So our weighted grading policy is actually an opportunity for our scholars to explore all different types of classes. So when we think about our scholars taking classes, we know that they take traditional courses, they may take an honors course, they may take an international baccalaureate course, they may take an advanced placement course, and also dual credit course, college courses under dual credit. And so our weighted grading gives us the ability to allow scholars to earn the grades that they do for their work. And so, for example, when we look at our weighted GPAs, we have both weighted and unweighted, which is really nice. We have them both located on our scholars' transcripts. And it's a place for students who decide to take these particular courses that I mentioned. It's a place for them to earn the advanced credit for doing more rigorous coursework, so to speak. And in saying that, it is again in our program of study, so people can reference it there. And so, for example, an honor student may have an extra 0.5 calculated into their weighted GPA, and an IB student or a student taking an IB class or an AP class or dual credit through college may experience a 1 point weighting difference as well. So what's nice about this opportunity is scholars are able to use their voice and choice in terms of the courses that they're taking, and they're able to earn the credits for those particular courses. One thing I should mention, or I should say actually also, is that when we have scholars, if they should decide to pursue college, that's one place where the colleges will look on the transcripts for a weighted GPA, and they'll also see the non-weighted. So they'll be able to see the rigor of courses and the courses taken when doing those credit reviews. And scholars are able also to apply for different things in the district, for example, such as internships and other areas in which they're able to use their weighted GPAs as well.
Yeah, so that's really, in a nutshell, once again, we've had this policy in place. The only change that we made is that we now put one sentence in there that explains, if you'd like to know what the weighted, weighted grading, how it works, please refer to our program of studies. And we'll also make sure that there, when we do post it, we'll put a link in the policy as well. So it'll actually either go to, the policy manual would be the same for McMahon or Nora Kai.
Good. Ralph, how long, you said you've been doing it for years, how long have we, I can't remember an AP or an honors class not having weighted. My children went to school quite a long time ago, and
it's been there since I've been here. So I really don't know how far back the policy has gone, but since probably the 90s at least.
Then my other question is the reason we're talking about this right now is the state has made a requirement that we all have a policy easy to access.
No,
so everybody knows.
we've had a policy since probably the last 50 years around weighted grading. What we didn't do last year is we never talked about this one in the model policies when we brought them up. This is one that just wasn't on the agenda as I was reviewing them. So I wanted to make sure we stated it tonight. It's already been in place. The only change that we made is that we said, instead of writing out the whole weighted grading 5-point scale there, we said we were going to refer to our program of studies, which is where we would be able to keep it updated on a regular basis. So there's really this, it isn't in a sense a new policy. It's just a minor update of one sentence.
Okay, we appreciate that.
Yes, and I'm sure that we'll probably find other policies that, we didn't go over all of them because there's so many. That one was a very important one, and the fact that now there's a link to be able to direct the student or the parent for more information, that was great. Any other questions, Deneen? Okay, so do we need to move it to the full board, Ralph, for that one change, or?
Yeah, I think it's maybe this is more of an FYI. So I do think that once again, we probably just want to bring it up again. It can't hurt
Mhm.
to vote on it, to bring it up for a vote, since it did change. We just changed that one sentence, but that's really the only change.
Okay. Motion to move policy series 6,000 weighted reading for honors classes to the full board. Janine, seconded by Mary Ellen. All in favor? Okay, so that's unanimous. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Carol. Thank you for coming.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so
Carol.
much. Thank you. Have a nice evening.
You
You too.
too.
Bye-bye.
And with that, for the next two policies, I'm going to turn this over to Louis Bray to talk about employment and student teacher checks, as well as child abuse, neglect, and sexual assault reporting. Once again, there are just some minor updates to our policy. We do have these in place, but each year in the month of September and October, we'll review any changes that were made by Shipman and Goodwin to their model policies and just make sure that you understand what those updates have been, and we bring them back up to the board. So with that, Louis, please let me know if you want me to share either one of those policies on the screen too. I can do that for you.
Yeah, I'm good, but if anyone else needs it, that's fine with me.
I would put it on the screen
Yeah, I
for
would
us
like-
and the public.
Okay,
Thank you.
sounds good. Which one would you like to start with, Louis?
Let's start with the student employee and student teacher checks.
Okay.
That's a 409. There you go. Perfect. So this is your policy that largely tracks state statutory requirements on the kinds of checks that you have to do on your employees and your student teachers and so forth. This is the primary change to this policy. And what this is it's a requirement that when people apply, that there be a notice saying they are not required to disclose erased criminal history. And that also has been expanded to include a larger number of dismissals, so to speak, of prior criminal history that the judge is either sealed or the case was dismissed or is nollied, which means the prosecutor chose not to, pursue the case. Things like at the end of accelerated rehabilitation in Connecticut, cases are dismissed and sealed. And that kind of thing, you are not required in Connecticut as an employee of a school district to disclose those kinds of records. You're also not obviously not required to disclose if you've been acquitted, because it's not a conviction. You are required to disclose arrests if the charges are still pending at the time of the application. Otherwise, it's something that was just an arrest, you don't need to disclose either. And that's all statutory. It's been the case for a very long time. This is a requirement that this notice appear on our applications, for positions in the district. Really nothing too remarkable here. We do have a current notice that we use with the AppleTrack system. It's just this year it's expanded to include all kinds of other erased records that people, because sometimes what happens is someone will disclose something that is erased or dismissed, and then the poor person has to go through the whole rigmarole of dealing with that when the state has a very clear policy against that. The state, for most employers in Connecticut now, does not even allow you to ask if a person has a conviction. However, for school districts, it's obviously very important, and that is an exception to that law. And we are specifically required by statute to check for the various things in this policy, which includes fingerprinting for criminal history, a check of the DCF registry for child abuse history, a check of the sex offender registry as well. Obviously, this is done for any employee who works for you.
Louis, could you explain a little bit more about how long that regulation or rule is that employers do not ask potential employees their criminal record?
That has only been around for a couple of years now. That Connecticut is one of the, states, very few states that have enacted that law. It doesn't apply to us, but it does apply to most private employers.
Thank you.
Sure. The only other change to this policy takes you all the way to the end, and it's a technical one, but I'll just go over it. It's just in your existing policy, you don't have the statutes listed. So I added those here for you. The statutes don't have the names of the type that has the citations, but not what they're for. And basically what they are is the laws that require the things I just described. There's also there are a couple things that got added in the last few years. One is that we cannot, and the law that addresses this, I believe, is let's see, which one is it? The personal 31-40X, and that's the law that addresses the fact that we cannot ask people to show us their social media accounts. We can't ask them to log on so we can see it. We can't ask for their login information. With that said, things that are marked public are fair game. Some people leave their profiles public, and we're able to see those. And I have found that more and more, some of the newer teachers are all public. So it kind of defeats the purpose of the law. But, and we do an online check of general Google check, so to speak, of people to see, if there's anything strange that we need to know about before we hire them. So, people expose themselves by leaving it public, but that's their decision. Anyway, that's one of the newer laws. And then there are other laws that require us to actually check employment history. We are required to check references. We don't just check them when we want to. We have to check them. We can't ask for credit reports unless the person is in a financial position or we believe they've been engaged in some sort of wrongdoing, that sort of thing. And so anyway, these are just the statutory citations that are in the Shipman and Goodwin recommended policies. So I put them in here for you.
So Louis, just following up on what you just said, does HR, is HR the place where the social media public statements would be looked at?
Yes, exactly. So when we check on a candidate, we do a search of a Google search. The Google search brings up the social media, public postings and those kind of things that are flagged. And if there's something strange, we dig as deep as we can, what we're permitted to. Obviously, we can't, as I said, we can't bring the person in and make us show us their social media account. But what's publicly available, we look at, and HR is the office that does that.
For every single employee?
I've only been around a month, so I'm not sure we do it for every single employee. I think I'm fairly sure we do it for all the teachers and administrators. But I can look into that a little further.
And I can say from experience too, Mary Ellen, it's common practice. So if I'm interviewing somebody that's a teacher or an administrator, I will do that on my own too, as well.
Right.
I will actually look for any public records and stuff. That's just a common practice now for us to make sure that we, as you're learning and reading through their resume, you're also kind of just, it's just normal.
Thank you.
That's the only changes to that one. The other thing I should just add, there are 3 documents, I think it's 3 documents attached to this now, which are the privacy notices from the FBI and the state that we have to give to applicants about, what is done with their fingerprint records and things like that for criminal justice information. That is one of the laws are very strict about this now, and it's enforced by the federal government. even though a lot of convictions are public record, you can find them anywhere. When we obtain them through the background check, through the fingerprint check process, that information is highly confidential. The only people who can see it are the people in HR who have gone through the FBI training. And right now there's just 2 of us, usually there's 3, and we're the only ones who can see it or even look in the file cabinet for the information. So we take it pretty seriously, but these are the forms. And the reason they're blue and underlined, by the way, that's how I indicate new language. It's not like the thing that'll be on your website will have that, but just so you know, that's how I handle that. And these are the forms we give them and that they have to acknowledge. So Shipman and Goodman recommended we attach them to the policy, so that's what I did.
Janine, any questions? I don't have any questions, just seems very straightforward.
It does seem straightforward.
Yeah, and once again, these are things that have been in place. These are just quick updates.
We're just cleaning them up and adding to them.
Yes, definitely. And I think there was also an update to our suspected abuse. Let me bring that up for you, Louis.
Correct. So the first change on this is on page 10. This is the policy that governs our reporting of child abuse to DCF. Your policy says that all employees of the district are to be considered mandated reporters, and that's how we handle it. All employees have to receive training once every 3 years, although I think our district does it every year, but I'm not entirely sure about that. I would have to ask Gabby, but certainly every 3 years. And what you learn basically is what has to be reported, who to report it to. We have to report it within 12 hours of learning of it, a verbal report, and 48 hours for a written report. That's what this policy is. And the changes that were made to it include the one you're looking at, which sort of has been coming for a while, which is that the training that DCF is providing is expanding into the identification of child sexual abuse and assault, and that can be by staff, not just really by anybody, but not just physical abuse or that sort of thing, but sexual assault. The pedophile issue that a lot of places have experienced, the bystanders, so what people should do when they see these things, and also appropriate interaction with children so that staff who have no intention of any wrongdoing don't accidentally do something that's inappropriate, or don't do something that could be interpreted as being inappropriate, which in my experience is sort of the biggest challenge for some of the teachers who don't necessarily haven't experienced that kind of thing. And some children, some people can interpret their behavior like being alone in the room. Maybe being alone in a room is completely harmless, but sometimes people interpret that the wrong way. Anyway, a training program that would include those kinds of things. I don't believe it's been fully launched yet, although some of it has been incorporated into their regular training. But we are now required to undergo that for all school employees. So that's that piece.
Louis, could you explain the bystander training?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure yet because that hasn't been included in the DCF training at this point. But my understanding of it is that it's people who are, people who aren't necessarily mandated reporters in a school setting. So if you're a bystander out in the world, you're no longer a mandated reporter, but I believe it also has to do with what your professional obligations are outside of the system, I'm not entirely sure because they haven't done it yet. But that will be part of what we're doing. There doesn't be a lot of information yet on that one.
Will new employees be trained as they come in? Excuse me, or do they have to wait for the district training?
The way we do it, which is really good, and having just experienced the system myself, I think it's pretty advanced. It's all linked online, and you have to do it before you start. So what happens is it links you to the DCF training, and then you certify and attach the certificate you get from DCF online, and it goes straight to the HR system and before you even start. So that isn't always the case. It is here in Norwalk, but in other districts, you're not obligated to do it before you start. You have to do it, usually within 30 days of starting. So I think the way Norwalk does it is ahead of the game on that one. It'll be interesting to see how that training develops in light of this requirement, because when I just did it, in August, and it didn't really have a lot of anything about the bystander piece of it, or the
Interesting.
or even the appropriate interaction with children part of it. It had plenty about identifying and reporting the rest of it. So it'll be interesting to see how they interpret that requirement. But it will be by DCF, as it says right in the policy and in the statute.
Thank you.
So that is problematic, isn't it? If they're saying it beginning this summer, that is
Happens.
required, but it hasn't been developed yet.
Yeah, happens all the time with Connecticut, because as Tom explained to you guys at the retreat, what happens is Connecticut gets all excited, passes things with deadlines, and then their agencies haven't quite finished their work yet, and it can be a real nightmare. So, I'm sure they've interpreted it in such a way that they're okay at the state level. But it'll be interesting to see how they build that programming in, because you'll, for instance, if you've ever worked in anything having to do with the Catholic Church, if you even have a program in the church, like we had Safe Rides in our local church, even though it wasn't a church program, we all had to undergo this kind of training. Because of the church's problems with child abuse issues, and it's amazing it's taken this long to kind of come into being. So it'll be interesting to see, because we've all know about child abuse and identifying that kind of thing and reporting it, when we work in school systems. But the whole, looking for identifying pedophiles in the workplace, and how to yourself interact appropriately with children is something that is included in teacher training, but isn't really a state mandated law until now.
Right.
The next change is another one of these date things, and it's on page 11. It's at the very end. Basically, that we have to we have to make it available, distributed to all school employees. So the program, developed by DCF, in addition to having everyone go through the training, we have to send them the information electronically so they have access to it. That's all that change is. Nothing really that different. And that's really the only other change to it. Pretty simple. And this is the most current recommended version at this point.
Okay.
Well, I'm glad that we're updated on the policy, and hopefully once all the information comes in, we can all be updated on, the education of it all. But like you said, it's in all jobs. I mean, I've been with my company, 8 years, and I just had to do videos on all kinds of harassment and things like that. So by the state of Connecticut.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, it's sad that we are where we are, but it's very much required when you're dealing with kids. So
Mhm. Yes.
a good thing.
Janine, any questions? Can't hear you.
About now.
Mhm.
Okay. I was just wondering if we're in a situation with volunteers, are they just supposed to follow chain of command, so to speak, and, report to, say, a teacher or a principal if they were suspecting of something?
If a volunteer in the school wants to, well, that you definitely should report it to the, to the school administrator, for sure. But a volunteer could also make a report to DCF. It's not, they've also given us an online option now. But the Caroline will take a call from any person. But definitely our preference would be that if that volunteer goes to the school administrator, the teacher and the school administrator, somebody a counselor, that the volunteer can work with that professional to make the report, and then the correct information. Because most teachers unfortunately have had some experience with this, as in all administrators have. So it helps us sort of work with a volunteer, and it's obviously kind of a scary thing to do for some people, and some people not. But we'd like to help and lend our knowledge to the report as well. But yes, that's exactly what they should do.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to combine both Series 4000 employment and student teacher checks and Series 4000 child abuse, neglect, and sexual assault reporting. Motion to move them to the full board.
Motion
Mary
to
Ellen,
move them to the full board.
seconded by Janine. Thank you, Janine. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Attorney Bray.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so let me move on to our next policy, which is the only new policy that we have. And let me share it up for you. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, great. So this policy is a policy that we have not had in place, but really is a necessity for the district. And I can say this from wearing both hats, whether it's policy or whether it's the fact that I oversee library and media services for the district. We did not have a specific guidelines for the selection of library materials. So what I wanted to review with you tonight was a policy that basically talks about, what our objectives are and our responsibility as a district is. And then the remaining piece of this policy, there's a break, is actually the regulation of how we actually go through our selection criteria and so forth, and weeding of our materials. And then if there's a question, how we can approach it as well. As all of you know, you've probably been following in the news, people talking about removing books and so forth. And I think the key piece is this policy is really important, because what it does is it actually puts in a procedure for us to be able to follow in any of those situations. From a 30,000-foot view, this allows us not only to have a procedure, but also to make sure that the protocol that's followed includes the library media specialist, it includes the administrator, it includes myself, it includes the superintendent as well, to make sure that if there is a question about something, that we actually have a process that goes through, and it doesn't necessarily leave it. In many cases, I think where this has happened, and Louis, please feel free to jump in too. In many cases in other districts throughout the nation, you've been hearing about different people being sued for different reasons around library selections of books, whether it's, whose responsibility is. This actually places a responsibility within the professionals, which is superintendent on down. And it also, though, protects our staff, because in some cases you may have there's been some southern states where you're hearing about them actually people looking to pursue this directly to the library media specialist. And in
Yes.
reality, it means this allows us to be able to make sure that our library media specialists have to be cognizant. They're the ones that actually help to make the selections because they are the professionals in this area, but they do it in conjunction with their administration and with everybody else. So it allows us to make sure that they're not put into that position at any given point. Over the summer, I looked and tried to find some good policies around this. There is no model policy specifically for this. So this was actually modeled off of the CADE policy. And one of the districts that I found that actually did a really nice job of editing it was Milford Public School. So that's kind of was a skeleton of what I used to be able to look at this. And then we actually took time, just like we did with the transgender policy, to bring in students to focus on this. This policy was reviewed by all the elementary and secondary library and media specialists. So we made a number of edits in language in there. And so this is what we've actually now come up with. And what I wanted to do is share this with you, knowing that, once again, we're looking to make sure that the policy is in place, as well as the regulation, which will be placed there. And if we had to make modifications to the regulation, it's a little quicker to do than changing the policy. So our policy overarchingly just talks about what are the objectives. Our libraries are here to be able to give resources to our kids, to be able to make sure that they actually have an area that has a lot of knowledge and that is non-biased, has the resources that they need to be able to see from all ends of the spectrum. So we want to make sure that intellectual freedom is something that we focus on. So that's pretty much our objective for this. And we want to make sure that our materials that are in our libraries reflect that of the global community. Our responsibility as a board is to make sure that we actually have, we do the legal selection of the materials. The board is designating this authority to school administration. So it's our administration, meaning the superintendent, the principal, as I mentioned before, myself, are the ones that are responsible for making sure that the acquisition or the deletion of books happens. And then what we've done is to make sure that we do it correctly. We put in a process now for this. So that's the policy in a nutshell. It's pretty straightforward, and it's pretty much in line with any other policy that you'd see around the selection of library and media materials. The next piece we go to is the regulations section of this. Under the regulation, we talk about what our selection criteria is. Okay, so how do we go about looking for different types of materials? What do we take into consideration? Like I said, it goes through the specifics. All of these are based on the American Libraries Association's recommendations as well. And so many of the pieces that are in here are referenced to ALA for us. It talks about just making sure that we have resources that are accurate, making sure that there's it's easy for people to find the materials that they want to be able to find, that it promotes diversity, and that we believe that it actually makes sure that it takes a global perspective as we look at our resources that we have there. We believe that we're not trying to indoctrinate anybody, but we want to inform our public, and we want to make sure that we offer multiple perspectives on any issues. So that's our selection criteria. For deselection, okay, which is sometimes, as a librarian would call this, they use the term weeding of books. Many times, like I said, we actually have gone through a pretty rigorous weeding process over the last few years. weeding usually occurs when books are irrelevant anymore, meaning that, an encyclopedia that's 70 years old may not really be really appropriate for finding information when it's still referring to borders, of countries that just don't exist anymore. So in cases like that, the librarians know exactly to kind of go through this deselection process. When we do remove books, we tag this in our system, okay, which is called Destiny Follett, so that if a report needed to be run, we know what books we've removed. And that's just kind of our way of archiving that in case anybody has any questions about that. We do say that we do keep that database available if it was ever asked for. Sometimes we look at things like not only age, but if a book, potentially, I guess a librarian would know better, and they would be able to talk to this a little bit better than I can. If materials are not valid anymore, do they need to still be in circulation and so forth? So it talks through our deselection process or weeding. We do follow ALA guidelines. When we dispose of books, okay, we make sure that we keep a disposal log, which is, once again, it's an electronic log for us that's within Destiny. And we do welcome gifts and stuff, but just like any other selection of materials, we make sure that we follow the same guidelines for any gifts that are given to us of books. So reconsideration, this is a section where we talk a little bit more about materials and when there's a question about any types of materials. We realize that there's going to be times when people may question the books that are available or that have been put into place. If there is a complaint or an objection to this, we wanted to make sure that we actually put a process in place for a formal request to happen with this. So basically, if you look through this area of reconsideration, we talk about, first of all, the materials that are chosen. The parents actually can choose whether or not there's materials, just like anything else a parent has a right to be able to do. If there is any questions about the choice of materials, and it can't be solved by just talking to the principal or asking a question, there is a formal process then that we go through. And just so you know, until that process is complete, the materials, and this is the way pretty much any library works, and the way the ALA requests it, the materials are left on the shelves until that process is complete and there's a determination of what goes on. So I'm going to skip to the end of this, because the rest of this, a lot of this is now just referencing to the Library Bill of Rights, our ALA format. So it's more of this piece is more of a reference of like what ALA believes in and why this is so important. But probably the most important piece of this right now, I think that we just need to review, is this request. So if there is a question or for reconsideration, we ask that this information is completed in a form that then is submitted to the school. So the person making the request, their what their complaint is, if they are from a separate organization. So let's say they're, we've had in many cases where there may be organizations that take time to be able to just kind of barrage community members or something to be able to post certain things. So this actually helps us to make sure that we identify who that is, and we say that that's what we want to know exactly where this is coming from, what group. It does not necessarily have to be apparent, so we can actually consider, like I said, the consideration of this is from any community member, okay? Explaining where the materials are, do they have a student at the school, information about the material, did this person ever really even read it? You know, what are some of the issues that they have around this? So citing the pages and stuff, and actually giving us specific information on what the concern is. And then what they want us to do about it. Do they want us to not allow if it's a student, do they would not allow their student to be able to see that? Do they want us to like remove it for every child? I mean, what is it that they're looking to accomplish? And then also asking them if they have any other alternatives. So this complaint would be submitted. It would actually then be reviewed at the school level. It would also be reviewed by myself, and ideally, if we run into the situation, I would be bringing that up also with the superintendent, so that we run it up and we figure out exactly what the formal determination would be for this. Really, this is common practice in most districts. My biggest concern over the summer is I was looking through our policies and realizing, as we working also with library media specialists, that the fact that we didn't have this in place, I feel like is really, it's essential that we actually get something into place. Once again, the regulation can be adjusted a little bit as we if we wanted to tweak it over time, but we at least need to have a policy that states I think it's the responsible way of looking at it. Our responsibility as a board to make sure that things are in place, and to make sure that our staff knows exactly the procedures to be able to follow when they're actually purchasing books, or if there's a question that comes up, how we can kind of manage that. So with that, I'll kind of pause for any questions or comments on the policy. Oh. Mary Ellen, are you muted, or?
I think everybody's muted except you.
Yes, I was talking.
Oh,
Go ahead, Diana.
I said, no, that I like the fact that this list is long and very detailed, and it doesn't seem like we've missed any, left any question out. And the detail of it, it's not just a yes or no type of thing. It's, really looking at all the aspects as to why, and answering that why.
yeah, because if we are going to have a good conversation with somebody about what their concerns are, if we don't have this information, a lot of times unfortunately, in the world that we live in, we get people that just post things because they're told by somebody else to post something or to ask for, something, and they've never even, they don't even necessarily know what they're asking for, or not even familiar with the material. So, we want to make sure that, we can kind of weed out that process and make sure that the person's actually, the concerns that come up have been researched by the person that's actually asking for that.
Mm-hmm. I get what you're saying, Rob.
Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. First, I certainly like that you have looked at the whole picture of what is the process of choosing books, what is the process of weeding out books, just natural process, and then what is a process if you have some kind of complaint. What I am curious about is when you put this before the specialists that deal with it directly, the media specialists, or do we call them librarians now? We've gone back and forth.
Library media
What was that?
specialist. Library media specialist.
A library media specialist, because for a while it was one thing, then another. Library media specialists. My question is, what did they ask you to tweak or change? What was important to them that might not have been in it? That's my first question, and then I have another one. Go ahead.
So, I mean, I think overarchingly, a lot of it was grammatical language. There was in the original policy that we reviewed, when we talked about the weeding process, I didn't realize as much as they're saying, well, some of the stuff that they're saying is archaic because we now have databases that do this for, like, we enter in a database. So we culled down this policy quite a bit. There was a couple of times where they felt as though we needed to make sure that we added in some words like global perspective and within there. So it was some basic language pieces. The one piece that they were wondering whether or not we should have in there, and after talking with Lewis, I realized that we actually need to have that place in there, is this issue of whether or not we allow others that are not parents to be able to have the formal process of being able to reconsider school library materials. And we have to make sure that we have it open to everybody. Am I correct in saying it that way, Lewis?
Yeah, we wrestled with that a little bit, but I think ultimately the public school system is part of the community, and it is a public school system. It's not just the parents or others. There's lots of people in the community that are concerned about what happens in our school system, and I think constitutionally you're going to run into a problem if we try to limit people who are allowed to make public comment, and this is a form of public comment, to just parents. So yes, we had to leave it open. That doesn't mean, however, that you wouldn't give more merit, for instance, to somebody who is more familiar with the system, who knows the materials. Perhaps, certainly, anyone, including a teacher, could go through this process. But yes, we had to leave it open, just like your board meetings are open to anyone who wants to come and watch them and do everything. This is a form of public comment and public input, and we are part of that. It doesn't mean you have to allow those folks in your building to come look at it or anything like that. But as far as this sort of process, yes, we had to leave it open.
Yeah, and we also want to make sure there's no anonymous complaints.
Yes.
Well, if there was one, we could ignore it. I mean,
Yeah.
An anonymous complaint in my mind isn't anything. It's just some angry person sending an anonymous complaint. If it's a serious matter, reporting about child abuse or something like that, it's a different story. But with regard to someone who's trying to get you to remove a Dr. Seuss book from your library, or some other something, I think it's better that we know who it is, why they think it's not appropriate. Are they attached to an organization that's basically using them as a way in? Because I think if I'm the library media specialist and I see something from some national organization that has no connection to Norwalk whatsoever, and they just send this to every library in every school across America, I'm probably going to not give it a lot of my time. If, however, it's a fellow educator who happens to have kids in town, but they don't go to my school, but I still want to, that's going to give it a little more merit if I'm the library media specialist. We're not obligated to weigh everything like a court, but we are obligated to receive it.
Yeah.
Good.
I think overarching, so just to answer, like the library media specialist, they dug into this, and like I said, this is truly one of those areas where if anything, they were very, very appreciative that we're moving forward with this. This is something that a lot of them told me has been something that they felt almost anxiety over.
Yes, I could imagine it being some fearfulness of their core beliefs, and then perhaps an attack. One thing I would like to emphasize is my agreement with the library media specialist in wanting to put in words that explain a global perspective for diverse students. And I see that as being cohesive to our mission as a public school system in Norwalk, that our core values are for every student, wherever they come from, whatever their personhood is. We want to respect that. We want that to be honored. And I think that's very important. Likewise, I think parents have certainly a right to have opinions, and that they should have a method to share what their thoughts are so that we can, back and forth. And this brings me to my last question, I think, and it's more directed to Louis. If there is an objection and on this reconsideration, the parent wants to have all students not be exposed to this particular book or material. And it goes through the process as was just delineated. This is filled out, and then it goes through the media specialist and to Ralph and the superintendent. Are we within our legal rights to end it there?
Yeah, absolutely. You have the right as a board to delegate final authority on various things to the superintendent. There's only certain legal requirements that you have where you have to, as a board, address it. By contract, certain grievances, certainly expulsions, unless you delegate them to, and you also then have the right to delegate that to a hearing officer, as opposed to, but you can't delegate it to your superintendent because the superintendent recommends, you approve. There are certain statutory things, but when it comes to decisions about educational materials or books or that sort of thing, you do, in your school library, media center, you do have the right to delegate that authority to your superintendent. You don't have to by policy, but a lot of boards do, because you're dealing with matters of that are for educators who are professionals who live in that world. Now, some boards want the final say because there's political issues involved, but that's the exact same reason that some boards don't want to be involved, because of the political issues. But you as a board always have the right to change your policy if you don't like the way it's being handled, to become the ultimate arbiter of these things. But you do have the legal right in this particular case to delegate it to your superintendent as the final authority.
And the way I believe it's written explains that the superintendent, our regular process will be that it'll come to the superintendent. If that's still not satisfactory, they can make another written complaint specifically, and then the board will be able to say whether or not they really want to take this to the next level. And it's at the discretion of the board that they can be invited to present if we want to for reconsideration, but it does not have.
It's sort of like how the Supreme Court operates, for instance. Not that the board's the Supreme Court, but it's a similar concept that you are deciding whether or not you're going to hear it, or whether you're going to allow the last decision to be the final decision. And that's what I mean by delegating it. You can say that's enough. If we're going to let our superintendent make the decision. Now, if it's just something that's so controversial and you want to give the superintendent support, for instance, or cover in the sense that you're going to make the final decision, that would be the only case I would recommend you would do it. And that would be purely, political on your part, as far as whether or not it's the kind of issue that the superintendent is going to need some cover on, so to speak, or support is a better way to put it. But mostly when it comes to educational materials, I really do think leaving that final decision with the superintendent makes a lot of sense. Obviously, we can address those on a case-by-case basis, but hopefully this isn't something that comes up too often. But we needed something, given the trend in society. Fortunately, it hasn't gotten to us so much in a more enlightened world. But that doesn't mean it won't. There's plenty of people who would love to remove some things from your library, I'm sure.
Thank you for that fuller explanation.
Sure.
I hope that we have more discussion with board members about this.
In what way, Mary Ellen?
Just, well, in a way that we just had explained here of how that works. And, I speaking just for myself, would certainly support ending that decision with the superintendent. I would support that to make sure that when we're discussing this at the board, that all the board members understand the sequence of what Louis just, amply explained. And it makes a lot of sense. And it speaks to the moment we are in our American history, of how we want to go about education.
Yeah, and like I said, it does map out specifically an appeals process on top of that. If it wanted to go to the board, but you can deny that and just say it's the superintendent's decision. We do not need to hear that, as Louis had mentioned. Once again, that's in the regulation too. So my goal right now is like, we need to have something in place.
Right.
Getting it in place, if we had to tweak a piece of that language, if hopefully we never have to even deal with that, but if we do, we've at least got a procedure that's in place that we know we're following, that protect all that are involved.
Okay. Janine, any questions?
No, for now, that covers it. That was a lot of good information. I think it's really, as we've been talking about, just very important for us to have this covered as much as possible right now, with these times. And some things are closer to us than I'd rather see. So, I'm very glad to see this coming across.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
Diana, what I was suggesting, and I'm not sure really the way to make sure that all the board members know these details more thoroughly before we have the general meeting.
Well,
Maybe Ralph, you could send out.
that would be for us to have the conversations with the individual members and not have it as a meeting per se. But then Ralph will present it. Ralph can actually present it more in detail if you want when we are having in front of the full board.
Yeah, I can definitely like I said, if that's what's needed, I can reiterate a little bit of the highlights and stuff at the board meeting and stuff and answer
The highlights.
Okay.
And especially the global perspective and connecting it to our core values.
Yeah, and I'm sure probably a couple of our library media specialists will be happy to join me too with this. So speak to it well.
Sounds good.
Excellent work.
Okay, so motion to move it to the full board for further discussion.
I so move.
Mary Ellen, seconded by Janine. All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. Okay.
No, the last one tonight is actually something that is probably the easiest out of all of them, because there really is, once again, it's a policy that we had in place. There was just one minor change. And so I just felt like it needed to be addressed and in a sense readopted, even though we've already followed this. So there is a policy in place right now for physical activity for students and regarding how it's treated in comparison to student discipline. And the policy basically just says that, recess can't be used as a punishment for students. We've followed this for years. The only change in the policy is that it's determined the difference now where in the past it said that students may have had been released from had it as a disciplinary action, that they can't have recess for a certain amount of time because of this. Basically now the policy says that you do have to have that determined time of 20 minutes of recess. That's really the only change, but it's something that we've followed But once again, I'm presenting it just because now the model policy made that change as well, where it's not may, it's actually, it's a determined amount that it has to be 20 minutes.
Mhm. So it's a positive change for the child.
Yes, that's all it is and stuff, not less than 20 minutes,
Mhm.
as is mentioned here, but we've always followed that anyways. So. Other than that, it's the identical policy.
Mhm. Any questions? No. Okay, I can't see
No
them.
question. No question
Thank
for
you.
me. That looks good.
All right. So if we take it off screen so we can vote. Thank you. So motion to move to the full vote board. I can speak. Mary Ellen, seconded by Janine. All in
Okay.
favor? Thank you. All right.
Okay.
So thank you very much. This was a very, very informative evening, and I'm glad that we got to see a lot of policies this evening. I know that people probably think that we go through these very quickly, but just a reminder that we do get our file prior to the meeting, so we all read them and catch up on them individually, and then we get to ask our questions today. So it's not like, they're scrolling through a policy and we're just speed reading. We've already read them, so we know what we're talking about. And with that being said, thank you, Attorney Bray and Ralph, for this evening and all the information. And there's nothing else. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Yay. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
night. Bye.
Nope.